And now we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Earthster training session. It's a special edition because today there will be me and Greg together. And we're going to show you how Earthster works. So first a small demo. And after that, we'll go through the latest feature updates. And in between, you can ask questions. We can take them in between the session and also in the end of the session. So please feel free, add comments into the event itself. And remember to refresh your page if you ever lose the video. It's always there and the recording stays. And yeah, a really quick intro. So I'm Heini from Earthster.
And I'm Greg, also from Earthster.
And Greg will show you how an LCA of a chocolate factory looks like. Or actually, before Greg shows you that, Greg is going to tell you what is Earthster really.
Yes, great. So hi, everyone. It's fun to be part of this meeting. And as Heini mentioned, I'm going to give a brief demo of Earthster. Earthster is a web-based platform for doing life cycle assessment. It's collaborative. As we'll see, I'll show you many features for that. It's a way of enabling people inside a company to collaborate on doing life cycle assessment and people across supply chains and life cycles to collaborate in continuously improving the accuracy of the LCA and quantifying the benefits as all the different actors in the life cycle are continuously improving the sustainability of their particular piece of the life cycles. So it's very much about engaging people around the world in life cycle assessment. It's and the progress achievement that LCA can guide and deliver. As you'll hopefully see and appreciate today, also, Earthster is really about bringing this life cycle assessment capability to as many people who want it. And there are thousands, maybe millions of people right now around the world that really would like to do LCA, but they've just been a little bit turned off by the interfaces and the user experiences of older tools. And so with Earthster, we've really taken a fresh start at bringing lifecycle assessment capability to everybody, really. And so looking forward to sharing how that's the case here in Earthster today and hearing your questions as well. So I'll keep my
sharing your screen.
Great. I'll keep the demo brief, but it's kind of a fun project. Of course, Earthster is being used by so many different companies right now to study just a wide variety of products. But one of the funnest, I have to admit, is by a chocolate factory and a company that makes chocolate. And I just thought that would be a fun way to start. First, though, remember I said it's collaborative. So I just logged into my Earthster. And in fact, I'm a member of many organizations, which I can just click on a menu up here in the top right and see which organizations I'm a member of in Earthster. Here I've joined the Earthster organization. And within any organization, we have a number of workspaces. So I can click on the little My Workspaces tab on the left and see which workspaces inside the Earthster organization I have access to. And one of them is this one that I'm in right now, GN Work. It's one that I created for myself. Workspaces are both folders that you use to contain your work, but they're also ways that you manage collaboration on that work. So I'm in here in GN Work, and you can see the faces of most of the people who have access, that I've given access or I've invited into this workspace. And that means that folks can look at, my collaborators can look at these models, and in many cases can collaborate on editing those models as well. It's up to me as the creator of a workspace, as the manager of it, what kind of access privileges I give. So let's take a look at one of my many cycles here. I have 24 cycles and I've got 8 comparisons in this particular workspace. And this one is called a chocolate factory, and you can see a little bit of the history of it. And I'll click on that now. And this is Earthster's main view of a life cycle model, which we call cycles. The life cycle model, of course, like all life cycles, is broken into life cycle stages. We have production, including the whole supply chain. We have distribution of the chocolate bars, the chocolate products to the customer. And then there's the opportunity for use and end of life as well. In this case, nothing exciting happens for the environment really in the use, although there could be, and we can include, I haven't yet, but we can include disposal of the packaging, for example. That would go under the use phase. We're looking right now through the lens of climate change. And let me show you that that's just one among many environmental impact categories that you have access to. Right now, I'm looking at a list of 5 impact categories, and I'll explain what those are in a moment and how you can learn more about them. Let's just switch to water use and see what happens. Okay, for water use, production of the chocolate bar is much more important than distribution. But if I go back to climate change, we saw that distribution gets relatively more important. You see the little tiny green dot next to the impact categories. That's an indicator that there's some help available. There's some more information available to me inside of Earthster. And once you learn that those dots are kind of magical info sources, you can start to recognize that those dots are sprinkled around the user interface wherever we go in Earthster, and just hover over a little dot and you'll see an info tip. And in the case of the environmental impact categories, we even have a link to read more all about the environmental impact assessment method, namely Recipe 2016, that is the source for these indicators that I'm showing you here. Now, a little bit later today, Heine's going to take you on a tour of what happens when you click on Other, and that's a gateway to so much more. But right now, we're just going to focus on these 5 impact indicators for the moment. Notice something else. This production phase, producing the chocolate bar, I mentioned, also has the whole supply chain that we're going to look at now. But let me explain this sort of bright side of the moon here is telling us that the factory itself, the chocolate factory, the candy bar factory, accounts for a significant share of, in fact, we can read it here, about 22% of the pre-distribution, of the cradle to gate climate impacts. So that's an important part of the story. Our own chocolate factories, smokestacks, if you will, account for a significant share of the total. The rest is in the supply chain. So most of it, 80% of the emissions are in the supply chain. To understand that and to explore the supply chain, we just click. I'm going to click on production. And now Earthster will open up some of the supply chain. And we can zoom out to see all this. And I said some of because the total supply chain, of course, is it's got thousands of processes in it. And Earthster is really designed to make sure that we're able to understand and see what matters most. One of the tools for doing that is this little threshold up here. So again, I can find the info and see that the threshold is just governing the display. It's not changing the model. We'll verify that. You see here the carbon footprint of $1 million worth of chocolate bar right now. And if I change this threshold, I can move it over to say 1.5%. Now I see more of the inputs, but the footprint hasn't changed. Just the level, the number of inputs that get displayed for me, and this category of all others has gotten smaller because that's where these smaller inputs were hiding. Earthster is rank ordering for me all of my inputs based on the chosen impact category. So for climate change, I know that cacao, sugarcane, and sugar beets and some of these other crops. That's my number one input in terms of climate change impacts. And if I change to, let's say, ecosystem impacts, we can see a reordering. We also see a smaller number of inputs. Um, and we see that one of them in particular has jumped out as really important, and that's our sourcing of the plants, cacao, and or the crops, cacao and sugarcane and sugar beets, etc. Notice also that for damage to ecosystems, our on-site emissions of the factory are now a much smaller fraction, just 3% of the total. It's almost all in the supply chain. Now, let's click again on production and see what happens. Here's where we open something called the data drawer for the chocolate factory, and we begin to access the data. This is also how you'll modify the model, add data, change numbers, and really have access to the whole EcoInvent database, as well as other databases, including UCO, that we have already here available in Earthster. Let me take you through this a little bit. First, we see the same list of inputs. They're rank ordered right now for the impact category of ecosystems, and we're seeing those results on the right. I'm going to switch back to climate and show you how you do that. You can just click on the little leaf icon and select a different impact category, like we've done here. These are rank ordered again, and we see the contributions from each one. Notice that Earthster's also abbreviating the units of the impact. So we've got tons of CO2, kilograms of CO2, and so on. And you also have these bundles. Bundles are used to take a group of inputs and make it more manageable for you. So industrial products is a bundle, natural resources is a bundle, and then the rest of these, when it's white like this, that's a specific process. At any time, you can create bundles to help you make your model easier for you to work with and easier for you to communicate the model to other people. If I want to add a new bundle at any time, I just click on the little arrow here and I choose add a bundle. And then I can also move my processes, my inputs around, including moving some of those into or out of bundles from one bundle to another. Let's take a look for a moment at where those on-site impacts are coming from. We see that in the background here, again, a little over 20% of the climate emissions are coming from production on site. Those pollutants, 176 of them total, exchanges with nature, appear on this tab. And once again, they're rank ordered for us so we can see what matters most right at the top of the list. And the biggest single contributor to our carbon footprint for the chocolate factory is on-site emissions of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels on site. In fact, that's most of the story. But in addition, we do have releases of different HFCs here. Those are ozone depleting gases as well as potent greenhouse gases, less than a kilogram, and yet over a ton of global warming potential measured in kilograms CO2 equivalent. So very potent greenhouse gases. We have nitrous oxide and so on. You can scroll through the list and you'll eventually leave the realm of greenhouse gases, and you'll know that happened when you see that the impacts on climate are zero. So just the top of the list, ending with this chemical, those are the greenhouse gases. So we've got access to all our environmental data for each process on the exchanges with nature tab, and then we have the processes tab here. Now, let's look at how you can modify the model and bring new data in. For example, I started with data for chocolate factories in general, and that came from US EPA database called UCO, USEEIO. We could have started with a blank sheet of paper and built our own model, but we started here with data from the average or the total production. And one of the key inputs, as we can see, it's important for each of the environmental impact categories, is fluid milk and butter. So let's just take that as one example and see how we would replace data on average fluid milk and butter production with maybe data for something more precise coming from the EcoInvent database. To do that, I just hover over this little icon and it gives me lots of options. Let's look at those. I could delete this flow. I could duplicate this flow and make a change to it. I can move this flow into a bundle if I'd like, or even to another process. I can edit the flow, but what I want to do right now is swap potentially the data out from what I've got so far, data from the US EPA, and see what about using EcoInvent data. So I'll click on swap, and that opens up Earthster's powerful searching capability. And I just type in milk. Now, EcoInvent is up to over 20,000 different data sets. And plus, we've got data from, I mentioned, the UCO database. There are other databases being added all the time into Earthster. And so managing and finding what we're looking for in the sea of, over 20,000 data sets is really actually a challenge. And so Earthster has built a number of functions here for us to help us get to what we really, the data, somehow in that data ocean, let's find exactly the drop of data that we need that's best for our use. To do that, we've got a number of tools actually working right now for us. First of all, Earthster has scored and ranked all the data sets based on just what we've told it so far, namely, we want data on milk production from the relevant, ideally for the United States. I've chosen that geography, that's where I live, but you choose your country. And we're seeing we're seeing data from a number of databases and different types. For example, we have milking and a whole market for milking across different source regions. Those are processing steps. But what I'm interested in is looking at data for milk purchased by the chocolate factory. So that's a material product. And I'm going to say, show me only material product results. Initially, I've got 230 hits, but when I tell Earthster, just show me the material product hits, I'm down to 147. Also, I want to look just in EcoInvent, not the other databases. So I'll say, show me only EcoInvent results. And now I'm down to 112. So we're getting more reasonable. At this point, that's a small enough number that what I like to do is scroll through the list and see if I can find something about the names of the relevant data sets that makes it most relevant to me. And I see that milk production from cow is actually a good description of what I'm interested in. I'm going to just say milk production and not type in from cow, but I'll add production. And once I do, I'm down to 74, and I see I've got milk production from different regions, plus I've got butter production and so on. And at this point, it's up to me to choose, for example, which of the data sets meets my needs most. And I just click to swap this new process in for the data I used to have. Before I do that, though, I might want to read more information about these processes. So, for example, I'll click on this info button for the milk production from cows in Quebec and see what I learn. I learn a lot. So I've got the description of this data set from the EcoInvent database. Where does it come from? When was it produced? What are the assumptions? What's included and not included? And I can also see what the most important flows are, both inputs and flows to nature. So That's often a final step before I make a choice to swap in my data. Now, for chocolate bars, and Heini, I could show maybe one more thing here and then pass it over to you if that's if it's the time.
Yeah, it's okay. You can continue.
Okay, and then you can let me know if we've got some questions popping up too.
Yep.
Um, Obviously, for chocolate production, we saw it right here. For ecosystem impacts, for climate impacts, it's the production of cocoa beans that's very important. And it turns out one of the factors that really influences the environmental footprint of cocoa beans is where they're grown. And I can learn that and I can study that question just using the data in the EcoInvent database through Earthster. And to do that, I created a very simple little process here which I call compare cocoa beans by country. And all I did was say, for this process, let me compare a kilogram each of different sources of different countries of origin for cocoa beans, all from the EcoInvent database. And so I've got a kilogram of each, but look how different they are. We can have everything from over 42 kilograms per kilogram of cocoa down to 10. So a factor of 4 difference, obviously, between the highest impact and the lowest impact. And that prompts me to ask, what's causing this difference? You may be interested to, look at different data sets or different potential sources of supply for the inputs that you purchase, and you also want to know why the high impact ones are high impact, or maybe you want to go right to the good news. Why are the lower impact ones that much lower in impact? And it turns out that for cocoa, one of the biggest drivers of their climate impacts, and also their biodiversity impacts is land use change. The cases where the growing of the cocoa beans leads to change in land use from, for example, rainforest over to the planting of cocoa beans instead. And this is true for cocoa. It's also a risk for other crops like palm oil, which would be relevant to this product category as well. And we see that right here just by exploring this EcoInvent data a little bit and seeing that by far the biggest contribution to the climate impacts is coming from this land use change. Everything else is all the other inputs to cocoa bean production are much smaller. And we also saw that cocoa bean provision to the cocoa factory, the chocolate bar factory, is a major source. So I'll just end by saying I can always click to see what else is there, and I can explore up the supply chain kind of indefinitely in order to get to find out what's driving my results and maybe get some ideas for how to make the product better. I haven't showed the compare function, but I think I want to stop there, Heini, for the moment and check in with you and also see if there are any key questions we should answer.
Yep, sounds good. We actually do have a question. I'm going to show on the screen. So Juan Mandy is asking, how do we select if we have two database options? For example, both EcoInvent and World Food LCA database has coffee as part of their database. So how do you choose when you have those situations?
That's a great question. What I always like to start by finding out is just like I've shown here on these coffee bean examples, cacao examples, cocoa beans, is compare them and see if the choice is going to matter, and see if it's going to matter on each of the impact categories. And that probably gives me the chance to go ahead and show you how compare works. Here I just have one because it's for this overall system, but let me go into my comparisons in general, and I'll show you a comparison of a chocolate factory with a modified version. So here I'm in Earthster. I've got this one particular cycle, and I can go to my comparisons, and we have this comparison, for example. And I've got side by side, I can see the total impacts for each of the impact categories, and I can see how important different life cycle phases are. I could quickly set one of these up, for example, to look at the different sources of data that were mentioned, maybe the World Food Database and the EcoInvent database on coffee from different countries or whatever it is. And I get a nice side-by-side comparison looking at all the impact categories. If it matters.
Can you, Greg, show how to add a new reference to the comparison?
Sure, we can just add or delete new items here by clicking on the little icon, choosing settings, and adding something new. So, and then I just search. So it could be coffee in your case, or I'm going to type in chocolate since we're looking.
Yes, and as you can see, this is the same search as when searching for processes.
That's right.
So you can compare your own cycles, you compare publicly available cycles and any processes. So EcoInvent and all the others.
That's right. And when I choose them, I have the option. You notice that these two are coming with multiple units of output. And that's important too, because over here, right now, I'm comparing $1 million of chocolate from each of these, but I could choose to make a comparison based on pounds of chocolate instead, or whatever units those data sets come in. So I could look at the coffee per kilogram from the different countries and databases over here, just by adding new references into my comparison. After that, it's a question of relevance. You know, if I see that the differences matter, then I really need to make the right choice, and I need to find geographically or the most up-to-date data, things of that nature. It's a question of, you know, appropriateness and the goodness of fit from the data set for what it is I'm trying to model.
Thank you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other questions? We would like to. It's a good moment to ask your questions if you have anything like that in mind. And meanwhile, we're waiting for questions. I would like to ask you, if you have an existing full EcoInvent license, let us know, and then we can activate it in Earthster. So the only thing I need to have is the license agreement, or we can send an email to EcoInvent. They can check whether your license is valid or not, and you can use it in Earthster. It doesn't matter where did you purchase it from. So it's an awesome way to get extra functionality. And for example, new impact, you can access with that with new impact categories also. And looks like we don't have more questions. Yes, we do. Well, let me show you again. Mikko is asking, can you export any output from this, like a PDF file with visuals? And
Absolutely.
Greg can show you meanwhile how to do it. And the answer is yes. You can export any cycles as a CSV file, comma-separated file, or a JSON file. That's for computers and APIs. And if you have the full EcoInvent license, you can export all the PEF impact categories also, product environmental footprint categories by the European Commission. And here, I let Greg say what he's doing.
Yes, well, you said it nicely. I just found, when I'm in a cycle, I just go under settings, and I've got the ability here to export the cycle. And I can export it, as you say. CSV is what people are usually interested in. If you want to export it for use with other LCA software, we can import and export data. Here you see export to the JSON format, linked data format. But for creating reports and doing other kinds of Excel-based analysis of your model, just click on export as CSV, and you get a very comprehensive set of data for your whole model. And actually, it shows me that it's already saved it on my hard drive, and I can just open that up with Excel. So as you say, Heini, the quick answer is yes.
And to a follow-up answer to Mikko's question is like, yeah, the CSV file, you can open it with any spreadsheet application. The only thing is, remember to set it to that the tabs are separated by commas. So if you use Excel, use the commas version.
Yes, I find it automatically, Excel gets it right every time with the Earthster exports. I just open Excel and then I point Excel to the file, and it's automatically parsed it nicely.
Yeah. That's true. Then, meanwhile, if you come up with new questions, just please write in the comments and we can go through them later on. And the next thing I would like to show you is the new features we are having. And one of them you might have noticed if you have been recently logging in. And I'm going to switch from Greg's screen to mine. Let's see. Whoops. You'll see us for a moment like this. We have a new chat support, which is super cool. When you log in for a long time and you log in the first time, you automatically get here a pling and you'll get an automated message from me. And if you have closed that chat for any reason, you can access it again by clicking on the question mark icon where we have help. You click on help me, and then it opens our new chat interface where you can find both the chat that sends a message to our support team. Then you can look for here. If you click here, it sends a message where you can have an actual chat if someone is online at the moment. Or you can start browsing the search articles. And there's some other resources. As you can see, we have the LinkedIn events. We have here, if you click on here, you end up in our forum where you can also ask the community for help and support, or you can just showcase your LCAs. It's a good resource to network with the community. But let me show you, for example, here, if you're looking for how to add processes, you start typing adding processes, it searches and it suggests any article that has those keywords in there. And for example, if I click on the quick start, it opens it inside the app, like side by side. You can see your own cycle, you see the article, and you can read it like this. Or another way of doing it, so these are the help articles. You can always go instead straight to documentation. When you click there, it opens a new tab, and then you can search the same from here. You start writing cycles, and you end up having many articles. For example, if you want to know the benefits of having, benefits of having a full eco license, we have an article for that. And I really recommend you use the help section whenever you feel lost, and use the chat. So this is how the icon looks like. You open it, you can start chatting with us, and you'll get answers sometimes immediately, sometimes with a day delay. But we are here to help you. That's one of the things. And I have gotten many awesome conversations already. Then other things we have. Let me see. Yes, Greg a bit mentioned about it already, but now you can bulk edit, not edit, bulk move processes and duplicate them. Let me show, for example, if I open here production, the drawer of production. My computer is really slow because of the streaming. It doesn't like streaming at all. I need a new computer. Bulk selecting works in a way that when you hover over next to any of the processes, bundles, or custom processes you have, you can click here, And then it shows up the option to select several. And now what I could do is I could duplicate these 3 different bundles. I could just click here, duplicating, and it copies all those 3. Or what's more likely to happen is that I realize that, oh, I put them in the wrong stage. I can move them all. So if I click here, move, I can choose the stage or bundle, custom process, and I can move them in there. This time I'm not gonna move them. But this is a cool new feature we have. So you can select many, you can also delete many at the same time, but that we had before. But an even cooler one that many's been looking forward to it having is being able to duplicate processes and bundles and custom processes. Here's, for example, I have in business travel, I have a bundle called company meeting in Finland. And let's imagine, so this cycle, what you see here is, they'll say a Earthster or a mock-up. It's not a proper one. And we could have, let's say we have 2 meetings in Finland, and what I want to do, we have everything the same. I just say that, yep, I want this twice. I duplicate it, and everything in there, what exists, will be copied into the new one. And now what happens is that, of course, this is a new bundle. So I'm gonna say second company meeting like this. And then it was a more expensive trip. I update the values. Everything is recalculated straight away. We're gonna put everything double, almost everything. What did I do? Deleted a 0. Here, whoops. Yeah, that's an expensive restaurant. And yeah, so you can now duplicate processes. And if I go back to business travel, you'll see that there's both of them existing. Really useful for these kind of situations when you clearly see that you're going to use the same processes or similar enough. Another way of using them, for example, if you have created custom processes, you can use for allocation. You create one of them, would add all the processes, and you do the allocation through the custom process multiplying factor. So you can put 50% goes into production, 50% goes into use phase, for example. Greg, do you have anything to add on these?
No, nicely shown, and I agree. It really comes in handy once you've built up a piece of the model. Just being able to duplicate that and make a few changes is a real time saver.
Yes, and another thing, when it comes really useful, is that you might be using the same process in many different processes, many different, how do I call them, inputs. So for example, I have here one called online events. The actual process, what I'm utilizing is a USEIO one called internet publishing and broadcasting. Each happens to be the same one that I'm using to represent Google Ads. If we go here, digital marketing, Google Ads, it's the same one. So it's useful for showcasing the different processes, because all of them you're able to rename. And I recommend you always do that, so that whoever is reading your cycle is able to see it straight away with their own words that, okay, events, I understand that. But internet publishing, I wouldn't understand. So it's a really useful thing to rename your processes.
Agreed.
Then, what else we have? Whoops. Stop sharing that screen. Yes, we have one of the awesome new features. If you have a full eco-invent process, full eco-invent license, you're able to access other impact categories that Greg already mentioned. So when you open the impact categories, there's the typical 5. So if you don't have a full eco-invent license, you see only the 5 one. Other appears only if you have one. And if you do, let us know. You click here, Other, and you get to choose from the recipe end and midpoints. So it gives you many more options. And in addition, the environmental footprint 3.1, which has even more impact categories. But let me show you. For example, if we choose recipe midpoint, first you choose the category, and then you can select the next level. And for example, which one should I choose? Freshwater ecotoxicity. You select it, you click View Impact, it opens a new tab, and if my computer is willing to work, you will see the same way as you see all the other impact categories. You're able to browse visually the impacts of itself. So you can explore everything around, but this time it just doesn't want to show it correctly. In any way, this is how it works. So it's really useful when you need to explore your data in different impact categories. Just remember that you need a full eco-INVET license for it. Then we have about 20 minutes. We might end up early today. Is there any questions? Yes, actually, I do see some questions. Let me see. I'll stop sharing. Here, like that. So you don't see double see the screens what we have. And exactly. So new features, you have chat support. Then you can duplicate processes, bundles, and custom processes. You can both move and copy all those things. You can view the other impact categories. And yeah, there's one more thing that's new since the last event, or it's around at that time came live, is we have a new pricing model. But I'm not gonna deep dive into that. If you're interested in the pricing model, tell us in the chat, or just contact me afterwards, and I can let you know more about the pricing. It's designed more for that. If you're only a one person, it's cheaper for you to use than that old model. But Greg, what do you say? How about now a round of questions?
Sure.
Let's do that. Let me see. For example, Nico is asking, can you expand on how to choose the different impact models and the possibilities for visual display of the different factors playing into the impact categories?
Yes. So one thing I wanted to mention is, and Heini showed that right now we've already implemented, you can choose, if you have the eco-INVENT license, you have a lot more options on impact categories. By the way, the reason we do that is just that it keeps the price down for most users who are happy to use the impact categories we already have. eco-INVENT needs to charge more for their data if you're looking at more impact indicators. So if that's of your interest to you, we have that pathway, and the most economical way for you to access that is just get an eco-INVENT license, and then you have unlimited really access to different impact methods and categories within that. I think we would be glad to hear from users if they don't see their chosen impact assessment method in our list. Just contact Heini or through the chat and let us know additional impact categories that you have methods that you have a need for. Nico's question was, I think, how do we choose, and then also how do we display? Visual display. Let's take those one at a time. I think for the goal and scope definition for your life cycle assessment really drives which impact categories you need to include. And once you know the impact categories that you need to include, you want to choose basically the most up-to-date method that addresses those. Recipe is a very up-to-date method that includes both endpoint categories and midpoint categories. So it's a wise choice. But if you're interested, for example, in doing LCAs to support PEF, the product environmental footprint approach in Europe, then you will want the eco footprint method. So those are two of the ones that we've listed there. I think you you may want to read the documentation that we have a link for recipe to help you understand choosing between the different values methods, choosing between endpoint and midpoint. I think just read a little documentation and you'll see which of those meets your needs if you have an EcoInvent license. Then Nico was asking about visualization, Heini, and I think right now that there's several pathways. We showed how you when you're looking at the cycle view, you just change impact categories and you see the cycle view, which processes contribute how much to the total. You can always go into compare and look at all the impact categories that you have available at once. And then we showed how you can export results to CSV. So if you want to create a bar graph of all of the recipe midpoint indicator results, for example, some 20 of them, the right way to do that, I think, is export CSV, open it up in Excel, and you can create bar charts or other kinds of graph to show and to visualize those results. And we see users doing all three of those. People often, it's great to work with and understand your cycle in Earthster, but then when you want to develop a report to a client, Excel is sometimes a wise choice, and people have their preferred graphs that they like to show.
Thank you, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next question could be Juan's. When it is a dynamic LCA setup, is there a standardized way to do the LCA reporting and EPD?
Mm-hmm. Dynamic LCA had me thinking a little bit about linking to supplier data, and I'm sure you've shown that already, Heini, in other sessions, but it may be of interest here again today.
When you want to go through it quickly?
I think feel free to, give us a quick tour of that. That may be of interest to Juan. When it comes to, I can talk about LCA reporting and EPDs while you're getting that set up, Heidi.
Yes.
The export CSV is really helpful also for you just preparing an LCA report. Consultants are using Earthster in that way. These days, they have their own specific report format with their particular Excel graphs, and maybe the EPD also requires you to have reports in a certain format. Using the export CSV is a really smart way to do that right now. If you have a particular product category rule that you're trying to respond to, once again, let us know about that, and we can help you understand how most efficiently to export results from Earthster to get your results for a particular product category rule EPD.
But yeah, when it comes to dynamic LCA, it's the way we define it. So you might have heard us saying dynamic LCA or connected LCA. And what it means is that you can connect several cycles with each other. And I just went into the cycle view, clicked from the mini menu, the last one called data sources. And this is how it looks. And here you can see that this particular cycle uses 6 EcoInvent processes, 12 USEIO, and 1 from our own cycles. So there's one. If I click here, I can see that the cycle name is called Remote Worker in Europe. So anytime I update that cycle, I'm able to update it in here also. The only thing I need to do is update the cycle, create a release, and then I will show it here. It shows up here like this, that there's a new version available, and I can say that, yeah, click up to date. I want to update, and as you can see, it updated the total amount. And there are cases, so here you can check the cycle and decide that, no, you don't want to update it. And this is the same thing if you have requested LCA data from your supplier. which is a super cool way to doing it in Earthster. Let me show you. For example, if we go into sales and marketing, and it opens the drawer, and let's imagine that I have a contact person in Google, and they're actually willing to give us their environmental data about their services. What I would do is I request an LCA from my supplier. My supplier in this case is Google. And what I do is I just click request LCA from supplier. Here I add the contact person's name. If we have them already, I would just start typing Google. But because we don't have it, I'll show you how it looks. For example, if I invite our test supplier, test organization, when they are already a supplier, they show up like this. You click here, you add that, hey, please send me the information for this and this product that I'm buying for you. And then you just click send request. It goes to them. And what they get is this cycle that I'm using to represent their data as a template. Let me show you. If I click on, if now you see view as a cycle, I'm going to share that tab instead. It's a bit slow today, my computer. What it does is that they get to start with that as a template. So it's kind of like paid my numbers. If now we open the drawer, it's a super simple way for any supplier to give you data. And you never need to send a single Excel or anything like that. You should send an email just in case and, hey, did you see my request? Please let me know if you need help. But you don't need to, like with other tools, you have to already pre-think that what information you would like to have. What you do instead is send the process that you are utilizing. So if it's an echo inline process, they are going to get that as a template. And what they do is they will be able to edit all the data in that process. So which will represent their process much better for you. And what they do is when it's done, they click here the issue a release, and then you just update it in your own cycle. And that's it. It's connected LCA. Anytime they do a release, you can update yours. And imagine what happens when that supplier has invited their supplier, and that one theirs. It's an amazing chain, and your data is always up to date, as long as they keep their data up to date. It's an awesome way of knowing better your scope 3 results and actually seeing where is your environmental impact coming from. Because of course, when you have that data, you will be able to explore further and further and dig into where is the impact coming from. It's a useful thing. But that's about dynamic LCA, what we call them. Dynamic LCA or connected LCA. Let me see, any other questions? Have you, Greg, managed to see any interesting ones that you would like to answer?
Let's see. I would just add to your nice presentation there, Heini, that what's also special about that approach that Heini just demonstrated with Earthster is you're not just hitting your supplier with a data request. In Earthster, you're actually offering them a very educational, easy to use investigation, visualization of how do LCA databases currently model them. They could maybe gain a lot of understanding from it. And as you pointed out, Heini, they then edit that data and send an updated, an improved version of it back to you. They also don't have to tell you everything about all of their inputs. They don't have to basically divulge confidential business sensitive information to you. They can choose to just send you back their footprint results, or footprint results by life cycle stage, or footprint results by life cycle stage and one set of, one tier deep of inputs. But they can keep sensitive information that you don't really need confidential, and they can make sure you get the footprint information that you're really looking for, and the environmental insights as Heini showed. So it's more educational to your suppliers. It gives them more control over some options for privacy and transparency that just wherever you and they agree, they need to be on the spectrum of privacy and transparency.
Exactly. Exactly. And then there is one more question we have time to take.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mikko, do you have any example cases for this, like how to reduce company eco impact and what is cost structure of this?
Mm-hmm. Boy, we certainly have seen so many cases where companies get their LCA results in Earthster and they start generating what if analyses, what if scenarios. I mean, boy, I'll just give one example. One of the companies using Earthster right now they have a consultant that uses Earthster for many of their clients, and that consultant is doing analysis of production of trash cans, for example. And the LCA showed that, well, the company said, let's test the sensitivity of our results to using recycled content. And they found that, yes, sourcing recycled plastic instead of virgin plastic resin made a big difference for the environmental impacts on each of the impact categories. So they then used that information to actually recently introduce a new model for their trash can that's available, made with 100% recycled plastic resin. And just that whole idea, plus the ability to tell the market about the benefits for it, came from their LCA. And that's just one example. They use Earthster to ask lots of what if questions. For example, what if we source our electricity from renewables instead of from the grid? They saw that could be influential. So it's really designed to support the kind of question and answer that Mikko gave. And it's that consultant specializes in helping their customers get access to the Earthster models themselves. You know, they produce reports as always, but they also give the customers, the clients, access to the Earthster models so that the clients can ask the kind of questions that Mikko is asking and find new ideas that really are powerful and test them out.
Exactly. Play around with data, change processes, different materials.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good way of doing eco design, like with, I'll say, data.
Exactly.
And also another example that I've seen companies doing with Earthster is a different approach, that the product doesn't exist, but they are doing a simulation that what it would be like.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done several different versions and do a strategical decision that which one is the best for the environment, and chose that based on the LCA that the product doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
It's a super cool project.
Heini, I just saw a cool question from Juan that maybe you can also answer. It's the one about, could you use Earthster, at least the way I would phrase it is, could I use Earthster itself as a way for me to publish the LCA results, the cycle, basically, the cycle model directly in our website rather than, or in addition to an EPD? And that's one of the exciting use cases you might just mention briefly.
Yes. So when you have a cycle, what you can do is you can set the cycle to be fully publicly available, and you just take the link and you can share it on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you want. Anyone, even without an Earthster account, can access and see them and click around. They cannot edit it, but they'll get a view access to it, and depending on the level of publicity that you allowed it to have, they can see all the information on that. And another way of doing it is you can choose only to share with your customers. So when you have added customers into the system, you can choose that to one specific customer, to all of your customers. Let's say you share a full cycle with all of the customers, but not publicly. And it gives you a lot of freedom to choose to share with your stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an unreported way. It's a visual way of sharing an LCA, and what I've seen is that you saw how visual it looks. Just by one look, you're like, wow, that's the biggest impact. That's where we need to focus on. If you get a report, you see numbers, and you're like, okay, I don't know. I don't have time to read a 50 pages.
Mm-hmm.
But you have time to take an image and draw your conclusions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would say our time is up. Thank you for all the awesome questions. Thank you, Greg, for all the awesome explanations and the demo.
My pleasure.
And see you about in a month. And by the way, we have an upcoming event next week about industry associations and their role in changing the future. So if you're interested, sign up. You'll find it in our events. And that's it for today. Thank you all.